Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the August 10th, 2016 Planning Board meeting at the town of Raymond. There's supposed to be a gavel and a wooden gavel board up here for me to tap to bring the meeting to order, but it's not, so bring the meeting to order. The Planning Board has come to order. We do have a quorum. We have a roll call.
Sheila Burke.
Greg Foster.
Bruce Sanford.
Bill Priest.
I'm Bruce Sanford. I'm the vice chair. Chairman O'Neill is absent this evening, so I'll be chairing the. I'll be your chairman for the evening. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairman if you are unable to hear or to see. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. Call to order, consider of approval of meeting minutes of the April 13th, 2016 minutes. New business, item A, consideration of applicant to fill board vacancy, Kyle Bancroft. Item B, site plan application for Port Harbor Marine. Then planner communications, which would consist of item A, consideration of finding of fact for a backlot driveway for applicants Dewey Loy and Sharon Loy. Then discussion of any items that we may feel is specifically necessary quickly, and then followed by adjournment. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provision of the applicable ordinances. After the board votes on the merits of each project application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeal rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regard to a specific project not leave until the board has completed its discussion on the project. Generally speaking, appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the appropriate appeals board of Superior Court as otherwise provided by law within 30 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual right to file any such appeal, you must be certain that this board's record evidences your appearance this evening in opposition and the basis for your opposition. All persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the microphone, not just at your place on the floor, but please go to the microphone at the lectern. State your name, address, and affiliation with the project. You must sign the sign-in sheet if you are speaking for or against the project, and all persons speaking shall please address the chairman. First item on the agenda is consideration of approval of meeting minutes from the April 13th, 2016 meeting.
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. Do we have any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, it has been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes from the April 13th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried 4-0. Moving on to new business, consideration of the applicant to fill the board vacancy. Kyle Bancroft has submitted an application. Is Kyle here this evening?
Yes, sir.
Kyle, please step up and tell us a little bit about yourself and your reasons for wanting to be on the board.
Sure. My name's Kyle Bancroft. I've been a member of the town for about 30 years, born and raised here. Recently, I've been looking for new options to get involved with the community. Just recently joined the fire department, so I'm journeying down that path now. I seen that you guys needed some help, so I wanted to put myself out there, hopefully help you guys out.
Okay. Do you feel that you have the appropriate time necessary to come to our monthly meetings, any special meetings that we have to have, site walks that we may require to visit a site and look at existing conditions and consideration of an application?
Absolutely, yes, I can commit to that. I work for myself, so I have a flexible schedule. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to help out with you guys, because I know that from time to time that happens and that it could take up some time. So I am available and willing to help out.
Okay. I think that one of the strengths of the planning board is we do have a good cross-section of members from the community, business people that have construction backgrounds or engineering backgrounds, legal backgrounds. And I think that someone of your capacity as a contracting background would be quite helpful to us.
Great.
You have to be approved and appointed by the select persons.
Okay.
Do we actually make a motion in consideration of approval and send that motion to the select persons
Yes,
as approval?
Generally, you recommend.
Okay. Do I hear any discussion of Kyle's wish to join the board and any motion to recommend approval?
I'd just like to thank Kyle for stepping forward. It is a big time commitment, and we appreciate that. So I would move that we recommend to the select board that Kyle Bancroft be appointed to the planning board.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Good.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any additional discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries to send to the select persons with a recommendation for approval. Thank you, Kyle.
Great. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Next item on the agenda is site plan application for Port Harbor Marine. We will be having a public hearing on this after presentation of the supporting paperwork by the applicant. Assuming the applicant is here, please step to the lectern and the microphone. If you need to come up to the front to address anything at all on the site plan, we'll ask you to speak very clearly and loudly so that we're picked up by all the recording activity. Before we get going, I want to make one note. We do have very strict limitations on when all paperwork on applications to the planning board must be turned in. There was some paperwork, such as the topography plan, that was not turned in a timely fashion. So although we can discuss all this tonight, we're not going to be having a final vote on the application tonight because we don't want to get into a situation of allowing one applicant to submit paperwork late and not allowing the next applicant to submit paperwork late. So due to that, just please be advised we will not be having a final vote on this tonight, but we will have as full and complete a discussion as things proceed and we can have. So, the floor is yours.
Good evening. How are you this evening? Rob McSorley with Spago Technics. I'm here representing Port Harbor Marine for this proposed lease area on the adjacent property, proposing a area for additional storage of customers' boats and trailers on this lot. The lot in question is held in trust by the Hartley family. It's about 6.7 acres, 6.75 acres of property, and we're proposing to construct a little less than 20,000 square feet of a surface area for the storage of the boats and whatnot. We will be disturbing probably about 30,000 square feet or a little less with grading activities and whatnot. The way it's been planned out is to maintain essentially the grade that is there and sheet flow all of that, what would come off that, through an adjacent downslope buffer before that goes into the wetland. The surface that we're going to be using is a crushed stone versus a gravel. It's not going to be very tight like you would on a typical road, so it has more propensity or ability to discharge down into the ground and create less runoff, if you would. We did submit a project. We did get comments. Unfortunately, those comments didn't get to the correct email address, and that's why the packages got back to you a little later than we had expected. The changes relative to the plan were incoincidental. They were cosmetic in nature only. You can discuss that with the consultant. There were 5 simple comments as part of the comments that we received. One is just to address the standard conditions that we need to meet, more clearly define the stuff like preservation of the landscaping and the effect on the land and whatnot. There were 3 minor comments relative to cosmetic natures on the plans, and then there was a question relative to the down slope buffer, whether or not that would retain the runoff in a sheet flow versus being channelized, which wouldn't provide the treatment that we'd want to see. We did inspect the downslope areas, and there were no rills, drainage channels, or anything that would cause things to go in to be channelized. On the plan, we have indicated the treatment that is required based upon the point system of the town, and we believe that we have met all the requirements relative to the zoning, including the shoreline zoning ordinance. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Procedural issues here. I do have some questions, and other members of the board may have questions. Should we have the public hearing first and then go into board discussion and questions? That's, okay, well, does the staff have anything they want to mention, anything right now in regard to the applicant's statements at the lectern right now, or do you want to go right into the public hearing?
I have one comment.
Okay.
Because you're developing this area over the Portland pipeline, have you contacted Portland Pipeline? And if not, maybe we should get a letter that at least you're notifying that you'll be doing excavation in the area of their pipeline.
We have not notified them. Typically, when you don't change grade in the area, and that's basically what we're doing, we're maintaining the grade. We're not going to take any cover off the pipe, but as we have done on the other projects in there, we can notify them. I'll contact Mr. Kim Brown.
Any excavation within a certain distance from the pipeline, they just want to be notified.
We'll contact them. That's not an issue, Chris.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to proceed to the public hearing on the application. Again, anyone that wishes to speak for or against the application, please stand up to the lectern and clearly state your name, address, any affiliation or interest in the project. And please keep your comments brief and to the point. If a half a dozen people want to speak and it appears that they're all basically going to be saying what the previous person just said, then the chair may ask that, given the courtesy of just let people who have already spoken to the issues that you want to raise, if they are identical, just please hold your peace so we can move ahead. But we do want to have everyone that has a concern to be able to stand and speak. So I'm going to open the public hearing at this time. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and the chair will recognize you. And go ahead, sir, and step up and have at it.
Yeah, my name's Glenn Washburn, and I'm on, well, it says plot 80 here. I'm a direct abutter. It's really site 17 as far as Indian Point goes. I just had a couple questions. Is there going to be a fence around the area?
Well,
that they're talking
that's
about?
one thing that I was going to ask about, because the lease agreement that was submitted as part of the application clearly states that a fence will be constructed for screening on the east and on the south side of the lot, but there's no fence shown on the plan.
Correct.
This is something that we need to discuss with staff, is that if the ordinances do not specifically require a fence, but that the lease specifically says one shall be built as part of the lease, is the planning board constrained to require a fence because it's in the lease, or is that really a legal issue between the owner and the lessee that they can ignore the terms of their own lease, and if a fence is not required due to either setback or screening issues by ordinances of the planning board, can we let that slide? That's something we have to discuss, but it is a valid point.
Okay. One other thing, I don't know if it's a valid question, maybe it's not even pertinent, but I was curious, the lease, is it just for that area, or is Port Harbor leasing the whole 6.7 acres? And if they're leasing the whole thing, do they have any further plans for any of that leased property?
My understanding is that the lease is only for the actual area of the boat storage lot that is being not excavated, but is being cleared and graded to accept boat storage, and the access point from Port Harbor Marine up to the boat storage lot. It's not for the entire piece, no. And I'd note that that's another thing we need to discuss with the staff is when this lease expires in 5 years, if the owner of the property wants to lease, you know, for another boat storage lot to a different entity, or continue for another 5 years with Port Harbor Marine, does this application become grandfathered and follow that new boat storage, or are we approving something only for the 5-year lease period? This is something that we need to discuss also.
That's all I had for questions.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes, sir, please.
Guess I'd have to cover me if I missed something. What? I'm going to ask one, I guess. My name's Jonathan Corda. I'm currently president of the Indian Point Owners Association. I am not an abutter, but I wanted to express a few concerns and ask some questions. And I wanted to make a comment about the fence. You'll probably recognize there's a fence right now that was required to be erected at Port Harbor right now to protect those boats being stored to push things into the loon preserve, because we had some violations that were going there, so that fence was erected. And I just wanted to make sure that there was a consideration for fencing, that we might fence something off to protect the loon preserve so that that parking lot doesn't expand somehow.
Could you step up to the plan and
Sure.
show us specifically what areas you're speaking of?
This section right here is the Loon Echo Land Preserve. This is all wetland here. And that, you can't build on it, you can't do anything. That's the buffer between Indian Point and the marina. And it's basically, it's just all cattails and things. You see that somebody's thought about the shoreland zoning, because I believe that is, sorry. They've thought about the shoreland zoning because that looks like 79 feet from the wetlands, and I think it's 75 feet setback. Is that right, Chris? So that's kind of probably where I'm making assumptions. That's where that square was made. The concern I would have, and just suggest, I mean, we can't insist on anything, but if there were fencing, that you might just, depending on what they're screening here or whether they're cutting trees down, that we don't allow this to bleed in and then start getting into that loon preserve, because it's wetlands. We're all supposed to protect that. So
You mean bleeding from the actual construction of the fence itself?
from the, well, not from construction of the fence, but from the lot. I mean, what happened before and with Port Harbor Marine is the boat storage kept going further and further into the loon preserve, and then we had a company, the Loon Echo Land Trust, who was managing our property back then, and they started telling us about all these violations. It almost got legal, and then everybody agreed that they'd just put a fence up, and then there wouldn't be any more pushing of any dirt or anything like that into the wetlands. I just wanted to make sure that we do preserve and we stay clear of that, and hopefully they won't be cutting trees down and having anything going on in here.
Yeah, well, my understanding of the fence would be it would be placed as close as practicable to the southern and the easterly edges of the cleared area that are itself parking, because they're not going to be clearing trees beyond that parking area.
Okay.
If they were to clear trees 50 or 100 feet away from parking, obviously they would be getting into either the wetlands or clearing more trees away from the parking, which is not indicated on their application. So if there is a fence, I would assume, again, with staff discussion and with the applicant, that it would be placed directly on the southern and the easterly line.
And this is the southern and easterly lines, the top two here?
Well, north is to the top of the page, so
Okay.
east, yeah, the south would be at the bottom, horizontal to the parking, and on the east,
Great,
vertical on the east end.
okay. All right, that was one concern, and what do I do with the mic? Hand it back to this gentleman. The other, it's a concern and not a demand, but a consideration we wanted to have is Imagine having a campground, having your little fire out there, and having a nice dark night and enjoying the wilderness. And then imagine a Walmart parking lot having sodium lights all over the place. Wasn't sure if there's a way to determine, are there lights going to be out there
No,
for safety
no,
reasons?
There's no lighting, and there will be no nighttime activity. Storage would only be going into and out of the lot, or any maintenance required out there during
Okay.
the daytime. The application specifically says there will be no nighttime activity.
Okay, so there won't be any.
No
okay,
lighting,
Sorry
no.
about that, Allison. I did not have a chance to read through or get a copy of that. Yeah, I guess, does anybody from Indian Point want me to bring anything up?
Well,
Or do you want-
sir,
you guys-
if
okay.
anybody
They
has
can?
a
All
statement
right.
that they wish, I'll ask them to go
That's
up
fine.
and address it.
The only other question, well, I have other questions, but maybe Chris can say we can take this offline, but the names of the list of the ownership that was in the book, the pamphlet, there's some adjustments that need to be made. And I was wondering, is that something we go to your office for? Or
Assessor's office.
assessor's office? Okay, great. Okay, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am, please.
Hi, my name is Allison L., and I live in Cumberland Center. I also have a place at Indian Point. I guess I just have one question about, I see all the nice little pictures of the boats there. Is that a single layer of boats, or are boats going to be stacked?
There's nothing in the application to indicate any racking is going to be constructed out there, and any racking that would have stacked boats would probably have to have some type of a foundation support system under the rack, and there's nothing indicated there, so it's all surface parking from my understanding.
Okay, because I've noticed that there are racks in other locations of their property, but it seems to be for trailers.
Well, if the applicant representative wants to address that question, he's sitting right there, please do so.
Rob McSorley, once again, no racking. It's just surface
Surface
parking
storage,
only.
okay, great, thank you.
And my other question was, I know that after living for 28 years at Indian Point Campground, the Portland Pipeline is sort of fussy about what you put on top of the pipeline area. Are these boats going to be on cradles or on wheels? Are they considered temporary because of the nature of being on a cradle, or are the ones that are directly over the pipeline going to be on boat trailers, wheels, I guess is my question.
Again, I ask the applicant's representative to stand and speak to that.
They would be on trailers, and in common with Portland Pipeline, when they go through properties and whatnot, you're allowed use of the property. They don't want any permanent structures on them, but things that are movable, vehicles and whatnot.
You need the trailers underneath the boats to move them in with
Yeah.
vehicles to park them, yeah.
So excuse me, it's not going to be cradles, it's going to be trailered. Yeah, because I know that we could put a picnic table there, but they're not real happy even about that, so. Okay, thank you, that's all. Thank you very much.
Any other members of the audience wish to speak? Hearing no other comments, I'd like to close the public hearing and return to deliberations from the board. I guess I'd like to hear any communications from the staff about the application that you want to share with us before we have our deliberations.
I mean, most everything has been covered. My name's Will Haskell. I'm the peer review engineer for the town on this project. Again, we submitted our comments to Rob at Sebago Technics, and he addressed those comments. And primarily, it was just, again, mostly related to some changes or discrepancies between the plan and the application, and also a question about the stormwater and the buffer area. We really don't have any comments. I mean, I've heard your questions tonight. I will say one thing I heard north on this is actually to this side of the plan. So-
Yeah, but we're calling north the uppermost horizontal edge of parking. In other words, the fence, when it says east and south, I'm interpreting south to be the plan view south at the horizontal part, and east to be the vertical right-hand edge.
Okay, well, it would be east and south if you look at north, the way it's shown on the plan as well. The easterly side would be the bottom edge of the parking lot, and then the southerly side would be the vertical edge.
This would be more south.
Okay, so we're gonna call north the vertical left-hand portion, and south the right-hand
Right.
vertical portion on the plan view. So really, east would be the uppermost parallel point.
There you go.
Okay, all right.
So
Okay,
can we
thank you.
clarify then, is the fence going here?
No,
No,
So there's no buffer to the wetland? And
Aren't
is
you-
there a fence?
that would be south right there where you just pointed. Yeah.
The intent of the fence was to buffer between the storage lot and the existing residence on the property. So that side between there was where the fence was intended to go, based upon the agreement between the parties.
I mean, the tree line is going to be very close to the westerly edge of the parking lot. I mean, there really isn't, it's not like your boat storage is going to be able to encroach down into that
No.
wetland area because of the trees that are there.
The trees will be kept there.
Any other comments from staff?
Just to back up what Will said, any cutting in that area would require permits from me, and there's nothing on this plan. If they intended to do any cutting in there, they'd be required to get a tree removal permit, which they had not submitted for.
We did indicate a new tree line. It's pretty close to the old one. There's not much clearing that's going to occur because it's all cleared now.
Is
So
it beyond the 75-foot mark? From the
It,
lawn?
it's, none of it's past that dimension that we've shown on the plan. That 79
feet.
is what's being retained.
I guess one further question I have is, and they've defined 4 areas basically in the corner of the lots, corner of the lot that is defined as interior green space. 1,152 square feet. What is the intent for that green space? What are you going to be planting in that green space?
Retained as lawn area as it is now. I believe that the code requires it just to be green space, and that's what the intent was.
Sir, we've closed the public hearing. I can't take any more comments from the audience. I'd like to continue with deliberations from the planning board. Members have any questions of the applicant or concerns, anything they want to speak to on the application? I guess I had a couple of items. Rob, when you spoke earlier, you talked about putting down a crushed stone surface.
Correct.
And then in the same sentence, you said gravel, and
Well-
those are two different things. So
Yeah.
could you clarify that for us, please?
We're putting down a crushed stone, and what I was comparing was, well, contrasting it to gravel. It's not like a gravel, it's not the tight type thing, and it's gonna be a crushed stone that allows the water to infiltrate down through.
Okay, like a 6-inch layer of crush, something like that?
Yeah, I think that's what it was on the plans, or a little bit more. And
Okay, should that be noted on the plan?
it
as far
is,
as the depth?
there's a detail that shows that. It's the same, similar to what was used on the lot that's across the street. And
Okay.
DEP considers it impervious because it's stone, but it's.
Stone will perk more.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
I guess I'd like to ask staff about the fence issue. Again, just to restate the question, the lease agreement clearly stipulates, it says a fence shall be built on the east and the south side for screening, and there's nothing shown on the plan. Since the lease is submitted with the application, I'm assuming as part of the paperwork of the application, even if a fence isn't mandated, does the planning board need to stipulate a fence to be in conformance with the terms of the lease? Chris, your feelings?
I think if it's required by the lease, it's part of the lease. I don't think we need to get involved in that.
We assume that the homeowner has the ability or the right to construct a fence in their property, and that's why it wasn't included. It was kind of an oversight on our part, because we thought they could go and pull a permit for a fence regardless, and it would not be necessary as part of this process, but it's not something that's really hard to put on a plan, so. And if you want to condition the plan to that, we don't have a problem, because we proposed to put one between the house and whatnot. To the south side, we may have a problem, and that's because of the Portland pipeline easement, that we may not be able to block that access. So, and we'll clarify that when we contact them.
Well, I guess my own feelings are, and I've polled the board on their thoughts, that if the lease agreement stipulates a fence, and the lease agreement is part of the application, then a fence should also be part of the application. And if you want to not build a fence, or if there are issues with right-of-way in the Portland pipeline, that maybe the lease agreement needs to be redrawn and resubmitted as part of the changed application. That's my own feeling. I'd like to ask the board on their thoughts about the fence issue.
I don't agree with that at all. There are all kinds of things in there we can force them to do that are in the lease, and we have no business enforcing them.
Sounded like the old road agreements come along. We make sure there is a road agreement, but we don't police the contents of the road agreement. So they're required to put up a fence. If they do or they don't, that's really the landowner's gripe, not ours. I would kind of.
Is there any legal requirement of the board to, because the fence is in the lease agreement and it's part of the application and says it will be built, does that mean it should be there, whether there it is required by statute or not? I guess that's the open question. I have no personal reason to mandate a fence unless there is something that really stipulates the board needs to do so, because it's in part of the application as it shall be done.
I mean, to me, the lease agreement was submitted as part of the title right or interest requirement of the ordinance, and that's really what the purpose of that submission was to satisfy title right or interest. That's my opinion.
But I was gonna say, if this was in front of me for a permit, it was part of a lease agreement, it would be a civil matter to enforce that between the property owners, not wouldn't be part of my duties, and I don't feel that it's part of the planning board's duty. I think that would be between the abutter and the lessee. Well,
I think from a legal standpoint, that's probably correct, but I did want to raise the issue because it just seemed to be a good open question.
It seems like the intent was to protect the homeowner with a buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And if they put the fence up, it would serve that purpose. If they don't do it, it would be up to the homeowner, the Hartleys, to go back on the lessee.
And then I have a procedural question that I mused about a little bit earlier during the public hearing is assuming the planning board approves the project and the lease is for a 5-year period, at the end of the lease, what happens to the approved project? Can it be grandfathered and continued on with a different lessee, with the same owner? Can the owner sell the property to somebody else and they negotiate a lease agreement with somebody else, Port Harbor or any other entity, to continue as a boat storage yard? Or does this application, when approved, if approved, is only good for the 5-year period? What's the status ongoing?
Well, I think you could put a condition on it that at the end of the lease, that the terms of this planning board expire. Or if they continue the lease, that it would continue on. I think you guys can put a condition on it.
I'd like to ask the board's opinion on that, whether they would want to put a restriction on it for just the 5-year period, or allow the same owner and the same lessee to continue on a new lease with a continuation, or allow the owner to negotiate with a different lessee and have the same terms
You know,
continue.
My opinion is the owner can negotiate with whoever they want. So, as long as the owner and lessee are the same, nothing changes. Upon change of lessee and/or ownership, I think we might have an issue. My perspective is, as long as the property is being used for the same exact purpose, it's none of our business who owns or leases it. If the purpose of the project, of the lot changes, that's something we need to look at. But unless that purpose changes, the project is approved. It kind of gets into the same thing you were talking about with the lease. It's really, in my opinion, none of the planning board's business what's going on between a lease holder and a lessee. I mean, as long
I
as the
think that's
condition of the lot does not change,
I
the
think
purpose.
that's a logical way of looking at it.
the purpose.
Greg, Bill?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, it should run with the land, not with the owner.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the only condition would be if the purpose of the lot changes. But again, I would assume that would be a natural, they would have to come to the planning board if they wanted to do something different. It's a shoreline zone, so it's even more highly protected than other areas, so.
Well, because of the late submission of paperwork, we can't be taking any motions for approval tonight and taking any votes on it. So I don't think it's logically correct for us to enter any motions
No.
that would make a condition at this point that if the lease changes and a different lessee in 5 or 10 or however many years enters the picture, that a new application would be needed. But I do think we need to note for the record that when the board does take this issue up again and consider approval, that we would probably need to make an amendment at that time about that. Any other questions or statements by the board right now on this application?
Hi, everyone.
Yes, Chris?
Is this gonna be plowed or maintained in the winter, or is this summertime use? Or the boat's gonna sit there with the parking lot unplowed?
Same condition as the other lot, right?
Mike Susi, Port Harbor Marine. It's mostly winter storage. So I doubt it's gonna be plowed. It may, we may have to run a plow in the spring to get the boats. They're gonna be put in there in the fall, and when we need them in the winter, we'll go get them. It's more to just create a little room in the yard than anything else. Make ourselves a little more efficient.
I had some comments from the fire department. They were okay with this project, but we didn't discuss any kind of maintenance in the wintertime. I don't know if they would have any concern about getting a truck in there if there was a fire in the interior part of the boat storage area. So prior to next meeting, I'll get comment or feedback from the fire department, because I didn't really give it any thought until tonight's meeting as far as the wintertime use. Across the street, I think they have a lot better access to that because of 302. This is kind of in the back of the property. So
It's very similar to what we did
Yeah,
across the street.
right.
Now, I don't know if we actually ran a plow through there in the winter.
There, they can just pull right up on 302
Yeah.
and park right in the
Right,
road and get
right.
at it.
So I just I'll address that it probably won't be plowed. My concern was if it's crushed stone, if you're plowing that, it's just
That's
gonna
right.
push it up. So my understanding probably was that you weren't gonna plow it. But knowing that now, I'll just make sure that the fire inspector is aware of that.
Do we need a motion to table this thing? That we do? We're gonna table this?
Yeah, are there any other deficiencies, Chris?
I don't see.
What do we finally decide on the pipeline? Are they gonna get a
They'll
letter
submit
or
a
something from the
letter.
pipeline people?
He said he'd submit a letter.
Okay, well, that would be considered a deficiency, but could that be, well, we're not gonna be voting tonight anyway, but if
It's
they
not
don't
really
have,
If they
It's not a
didn't get it to
deficiency.
us, we could make it a condition at the next meeting.
Right,
But my
exactly.
anticipation is they'll have a letter.
exactly. I guess we need to move to table it, simply because of the submission of late paperwork. We've closed the public hearing,
No,
sir.
this isn't about that, okay? This is another question. Since you're not approving that and you've closed the public input, some of those things could change, and it could change my opinion. So you're just telling me that that's it, we've had our shot?
When we have the public hearing, everybody is allowed to stand up and speak to the
Understood.
issue. But when we close the public hearing, we can't take any more public comments and reopen the
Well, some of
public
the
hearing.
conditions change.
If there is a material condition that, in the opinion of the board, warrants a new public hearing, then we would reschedule one, yes.
Okay. Just curious.
You could open it up at the next meeting for public comment.
Pardon?
You could open up the next meeting for public comment.
Yes, that's true.
That's fine. I just, that was my question.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's fine, thank you. Do we have any motion to table to the next meeting?
So move.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried to table to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Pardon? Oh, yeah.
Go right ahead.
You're welcome to stay.
Go right ahead. We're usually all by ourselves.
Folks, we are still in session, so if you're going to have any conversations, please continue them outside, because we are still in session and we need to continue with our business.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next item.
They get a copy. I'm gonna wait for them to settle down a little bit.
The findings for each approach, did they get it? They did. I could have asked you that.
Thank you.
Continuing on with the agenda, we have no other new business to consider this evening. We'll go to planner communications. Considerations of finding a fact for the backlot driveway application from Dewey Eloy and Sharon Eloy. I'd like to open the floor to our town planner.
Thank
Jim.
you. I'll let them kind of close up shop there real quick. We did have an application that was a staff review for a backlot driveway at 140 Egypt Road. This one got a little bit, I don't know what the word would be, not contentious, but this one was a little more difficult than the other backlot driveway applications we've done. We did meet with them. They came with a layout of the backlot they wanted. There were some site features they wanted to preserve on the original lot. So we told them they could come back and revise that, and in doing so, something got lost in translation. The biggest issue we had with this one was they had a right-of-way that went over the original lot and went into the proposed lot. The problem was that once that right-of-way went into the proposed lot, it still didn't create the necessary frontage. The right-of-way was on the lot, but it didn't create enough, perimeter frontage for legal lot coverage. And we tried to discuss that with them, and we met with their surveyor and their engineer and everything, and we went through several iterations, and it got a little bit heated at times just because they thought we were being overzealous and being over the top. Both Chris and I were trying to discuss, we tried to show them exactly what we wanted, but I think there were some, I don't know what's miscommunications with our ordinance or misunderstandings of our ordinance. We finally worked it out. So with that, I did prepare the findings of fact. They have a small area of wetland that was under 4,300 square feet, so it did not require DEP. It met all of the criteria of the backlot ordinance. Dustin Roma from DM Roma Consulting Engineers provided us calculations because there were a few culverts that needed to be placed on the backlot driveway. And they provided soil test pits for the house lot they're creating. I think another issue that was a little bit confusing was, under the backlot ordinance, there's a provision in there that they still have to meet the phosphorus requirements. And as such, they have multiple choices. They can either follow the BMPs, the DEP, or they can follow our point system that we've created. In doing so, they chose the point system, and they decided to use the tree buffer. I think the owner is still trying to compute whether he likes that or not. From the standpoint is it puts a deed restriction on the original lot. I don't think he was fully aware of that. So they may eventually come back and try to revise that and use some other measure to get the effective treatment for the backlot driveway. But as it stands now, they're staying with the easement. Again, Chris and I have reviewed this. We both have signed the findings of fact. We had 3 conditions. One was we just wanted to make sure, because the land was on a slope, that the lowest elevation of the foundation of the home was 18 inches higher than the elevation of the surrounding land. That we get an as-built for all the inverts of the culverts being placed, and that the plans and deeds for the backlot and backlot driveway be recorded. That's a requirement of our ordinance. So other than just trying to describe and instruct and educate everybody, I think the other thing that Chris and I determined was that because these backlot driveways tend to be more owner-oriented and not so much going to a consultant right away, we think that we probably should prepare a kind of a step-by-step process checklist for these to help the owners move along, so that if they do run up against something that requires professional assistance, they know up front. I think with this one, the owner thought that they could do it on their own and not realize that there's just some components of these long driveways that still takes some professional assistance, whether it be surveyor, whether it be engineer, whether it be a wetland scientist. I just think that, you know, that and the anticipated costs as they're going through that would be very beneficial for most applicants. So,
Just to add to that, we've had surveyors come in and do backlot driveways and do everything. They hired a surveyor, and his expertise was surveying, but it wasn't in land use or point system. So they ended up having to hire an engineer, and I think that led to more frustration that, you know, they were hiring all these professionals, and one person's telling one person one thing, and it just got a little bit diluted, I guess. And, you know, we tried to keep things going, but it was rather difficult. So I think Jim's comment about staff doing a review checklist for staff reviews or for backlot driveways, that's something we can work on. We can do that this winter when we're doing our workshops. Jim and I can get it ready and then go through it at some of our workshops this winter.
I think that's a great idea.
I think across the board, you know, when we look at these, I think
The checklists are
the
great.
checklists for all of our
They
site
all need to be reviewed.
They all need to be reviewed. I mean, they're very basic, and if you go to some of the other towns, they kind of, you know, spell it step by step. Not only the board process, but what's anticipated at each preliminary step, each final step, what's anticipated on the plans, and what information we're looking for. Right now, it's kind of very general, open-ended, and I think when people start looking at it, they say, oh, I can do that, and then as they get educated, they're like, you know, like with the wetlands on this one. You need a wetland scientist to go out there and identify those, or somebody with that kind of expertise in licensing, and they thought they could just go through it, and, you know, once you explain that to them, then they go, oh boy, here comes more expense. And so again, if people know what they have to do, how they have to do it, they can budget themselves and be better prepared. I think in this case, they just weren't prepared, and, you know, things just kind of
Well, I
snowballed
think,
on them.
again, the outcome is that staff bears the brunt of that frustration as you're going through the process, so.
And we always have the option that if we get too frustrated, you know, we could bump it up to you to review, but in this case, both Chris and I felt that, boy, we were right there. We were so close, we just felt, this is not the burden to put on the board, or the applicant to wait another month to get before the board. And that's what we tried to explain to the applicant, is that previously, this would have had to come through for a private road. It would have been probably 2 or 3 months before the board. And in this case, they were able to get their permits, even though we went back and forth several times. Within 4 to 5 weeks, they had, you know, everything they needed to go
You
forward.
know, we've had, since we adopted the staff review for backlot driveways, we've probably done a half a dozen of these and never had any real issues. This is the first time, and so we'll try to improve the process and take a little look at it. And
Well,
bring
again,
it
I
back
think
to you guys.
it's great for owners and the townspeople.
Well, what's tough is you've got, the backlot driveway is in the land use ordinance,
Right.
it's also in the street ordinance. So, you know, you can read one whole section, think you got it, and then there's a whole nother section. It's like Port Harbor was just in here, and there's the land use ordinance, they missed the whole shoreline zoning ordinance when they
Yes.
first came to us with their plan. So, you know, you've gotta really understand the ordinance to comprehend the whole process.
And that was one of the hookups with this one, is when they go into the street ordinance to see how we want the terminus to work.
Yeah.
They didn't realize they had to go in the street ordinance. Once we showed them that, they went, oh, well, why don't you just tell us up front that? You know, and
Yeah.
those are some of the little details that, if you had a checklist, you could say, verify under the street ordinance for the terminus of the backlot driveway. And
Exactly.
then
Does
they
that
would
mean
know.
the board needs to consider having a workshop to redesign the ordinances to get everything related to a backlight driveway under one?
No, I think it's more or less just to
No,
have
no,
it so
wait.
that step by step, so that when the applicant
Yeah.
comes in, you can hand them a checklist, and then they can say, oh, I gotta do that, I gotta do that, I gotta do that.
I've gotta go look here
And you give them
make
a section of the
sure-
ordinance
yeah.
to refer to if there's a
Absolutely.
question.
We
Yeah.
could do it at any meeting
Right.
that we have some time,
Mhm.
and we'll just bring it as planner communications and give you copies of it before the meeting and get your comments, and then we'll revise it. And
Sure.
it's not gonna be something that's in the ordinance, it's gonna be something that's on the website.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Easily
Yes.
available for people.
And I think it's beneficial for shoreline zoning applications, site plans, especially the staff review, again, because most major site plans, like you saw this evening, they hire an engineering firm, and they're more equipped and understanding of the ordinance, but even they can
Miss the
miss some,
shoreline, yeah.
miss some things. So I think overall, I don't know when the last time the checklists were
Well,
done, but they're probably time to be
cosmetic when they
reviewed.
missed the entire shoreline zone thing was.
And it
kinda like-
streamlines the process for all of us, because it also gives us,
A little guide.
a little guide as well. Did they do this, did they do that?
Yep.
And those can be changed from time to time. I think it's probably been a long time since those have been reviewed and looked at. So
Mhm.
it's time to help everybody out. Ordinances get more and more difficult.
And I'd like to ask a
You can-
process question in that regard. You know, we did revise, did some significant revisions to the shoreline zoning, and that current ordinance is not on the website.
It will be.
Okay, I was gonna ask, when are we gonna get one?
It's very close. I actually have 2 copies with me with all the revisions that we had. In years past, we've had our own staff make the revisions. Because there were so many, particularly with the shoreline zone,
Yeah.
we had Stephanie Carver, that presented those changes to you at many of the meetings. Her organization is set up to do that kind of review
Okay.
and make sure that all the numbering and lettering, I'm sure some of you have been frustrated at a meeting when I'm sitting here saying, backlots are on page 68, and you're looking at your book and it's on page 64. That's because we've had staff do these changes over the number of years, and nobody's done a comprehensive look at the whole ordinance. So I've done that with the land use ordinance, the shoreline zoning ordinance,
That's
and
great.
then we've got a couple left. We've got to do the fire protection ordinance and miscellaneous ordinance.
Because I'm bouncing between this
Right.
and the town warrant
By the
right
next,
now.
by the next
Exactly,
meeting,
yeah.
you guys will have a whole new set of ordinances to put into your notes.
Mhm.
But as far as the checklists go, I don't think that's anything that needs to go to the selectmen. I think that's just something
No.
we need to
Yeah,
do
that's
as a
just-
workshop, and just give us, what we'll do is we'll probably provide a draft, and then we can have a workshop and
Yeah,
go
it's
through.
it's a process tool, you
Right.
know, it's not a,
That's one thing I wanted to bring up about changes to the ordinance, just a quick note, when the town staff issues, these bundled changes to the shoreland zoning or whatever, when we get a new item to insert into our planning book, could you please be sure those are 3-hole punched before they're sent out to us? Because
Yes,
I don't
we
have
will.
a 3-hole punch, and trying to, jab a pencil through each,
They make 'em every
paper
day.
to fit it in here, it gets a little laborious. That would be helpful. I do have a question about the conditions of approval. As I read item A about the minimum of 18 inches higher than the lowest elevation of either the proposed driveway or the surrounding grades, I understand what the intent is, but when I read that, I was thinking, well, what if it was very hilly around the house and you had a grade that was 24 inches below another grade? and you're asking for the floor of the house to be 18 inches higher than the lowest grade. Well, if the lowest grade is 24 inches below the highest grade, you're asking for the floor of the house to be set 6 inches below the highest grade. You see what I'm saying?
No, I mean, I think what we're trying to say there is that the shallowest height above the ground can be 18. If it's deeper than that, that's fine.
So I wonder if the word lower, lowest elevation should really say highest elevation.
I think we haven't had an issue with this. This has been kind of a common condition you've been putting on these backlots, just because we've had a few that have been on the hills and some of them have been in low spots.
You see my concern? The way that reads is that you may actually be requiring the floor of the house to be below an adjacent grade because it has to be 18 inches higher than the lowest grade.
Yeah, we might want to say 18 inches higher at the, we can wordsmith that. We can, I get what you're saying. We can try to provide a little bit clearer language on that.
Yeah.
Is that something you think needs to be done for this
I don't think it, I mean, Chris deals with this all the time anyway, so it's more of a, he checks the foundations obviously before they go out anyway. We just didn't want to have one get too low so that,
Sure.
Water gets into the elevations of the.
Maybe you take that into consideration on future ones.
Absolutely.
When you look at the next one, this one actually, the grade goes uphill, so they're gonna be above no matter what they do.
Okay.
We've had some that go the other way, so.
Okay, procedurally, at this point, assuming we want to accept the findings of fact, all we need to do is move and approve. We don't have to
You
go
don't have to even
through.
approve.
You don't even,
It's
We don't
just
need to do
really
that.
consent item. This is because when we put this together, the idea was that we would bring you up to speed of what
We're just keeping you in the
what
loop.
what we've approved so that you can be
So that
aware.
you can give
Okay.
us comments.
All right.
Will the chair allow more discussion about this situation? Well, for full disclosure, I want to tell you that Dewey Loy, I know Dewey, he knows me, and he called me about this, and he asked me if it was appropriate to speak with me as a member of the planning board. I said, absolutely, anything you discuss with me, I'll discuss with the board. And he asked me, well, there were two things that bothered him. One was the process he found, but Jim said it wound up being contentious. It was a difficult thing for him to go through, and he asked that the planning board consider just what we're talking about, making it more streamlined.
Right.
And the second thing, what was the second thing?
Was it
My
the
mind's-
stormwater question? I know one of his consultants didn't feel that he had to do the stormwater phosphorus points, and I didn't know when one of the consultants called me exactly where it was in the ordinance. He called me at my office, but I related to Chris because Chris had pointed out to me where it is in there, where in the ordinance. And again, if there was a checklist, they'd be able to go to that point and find it more readily than to, because if you've never worked in an ordinance before, you know how difficult it can be. It's like going to the dictionary.
I'm still confused, Bob, and
Right.
I've been on the planning board.
So again,
for,
if we can help streamline
while.
with a clearer checklist, so again, I think in the case of Mr. Dewey Law, I think he was just overwhelmed by the fact that he thought he had this figured out, and then as he got into it, it just became more and more expensive and time consuming for him. For point of disclosure, the other thing is that, Chris and I bent over backwards, and actually they started the project before, they had permits.
Mhm.
So, sometimes no good deed goes unpunished. We thought we could just catch this one up and get taken care of, but that's fine.
I think it's as much a nature of ordinances as anything.
Yeah.
And
they're built that way.
it's too convoluted, it's too involved, and it's, I'm not a big supporter of
I know.
government meddling with all these things that people have to do. And if we do anything with this ordinance, I would like to see it destructured to some degree. If we're gonna play with it in any way, other than maybe making a checklist of things to do, I would suggest maybe removing some of these concepts.
And again, I just want to point out that, from where we started, if this had been 2 years ago, he'd have to go before the board for a private road, much more involved than just a simple backlot driveway.
We went from
Oh, I know,
the
I know all
process
that
we
stuff
have-
happened, but.
I'm just saying that we have streamlined it to, out of 7 backlot driveways, we've only had one problem on one. The other 6 went very smoothly, and we got them done, and what, 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah.
This one,
Usually
I
it's just
think
the public notice
They applied
period.
on June 23rd, and they got their permit August
Second, third, fourth, something like that.
3rd. So I mean, that's
No, I
still
understand all
4 or 5
that.
weeks.
But I've been on the receiving end of things of that nature, mainly doing forestry, including an issue in Raymond, and it is frustrating, and I didn't used to, I handle it more gently than I did in years past. I used to get angry, and I can totally understand why someone would get upset with the process, and it's not necessarily the people or the what they're trying to do, it's the ordinance, and I just think we're gone too far in what we do to people. And if you're a landowner, you know, that Dewey he's taken real good care of his land, he grows Christmas trees, he's a very conscientious person in terms of conservation and so forth. And then he comes to the town to do something he called pretty simple, and I think it really is. And he winds up getting treated like that, and like I say, it's not necessarily a personality conflict, it's nature of the ordinance.
And you gotta understand that he changed his plan
Yeah,
several
yeah,
times. And
I-
his
you know, he
consultants-
told me
Maybe
that,
without
but-
his knowing, the consultants changed some things too.
Yeah.
So, again, I think it's a communication
Well-
thing, and I think it's an explanation thing, and it's an education thing, and as we said, we've all kind of moved on from this, and, you know, we've kept our.
Oh, I
professional-
understand that,
But I think.
like I said, I've been on the receiving end.
I think we
and-
go light years into, you know, helping people understand what they need.
Well, and I do think that over the years, the town staff and the planning board have worked together to try to coalesce and clear up confusion and misconceptions and errors between different areas of the ordinances, and try to not necessarily streamline, but coalesce and make things more clear and concise where we can. And I agree with Greg to some point that these ordinances can be very frustrating because they seem to lay out so many conditions that people have to meet to do anything. But the reverse is true, that if we just throw all the ordinances away and don't have any guidelines, then we have nothing to judge an application for when it comes before us. So there's a fine line between
And
those
the
two
other thing too,
viewpoints.
it's extremely difficult, is given Raymond's location in the lakes and ponds and a lot of watersheds, you know, a lot of the things we get do trickle down from the state to protect the waterways. And we all know that that's one of Raymond's biggest, you know, concerns with the environment, is to protect the
Well,
waterways.
I've been involved with Raymond doing a lot of these things from comprehensive plans, and I really think to a great degree that's used as a tool or a weapon or whatever you want to say, that the lakes and protecting them. I think they've advanced a lot of arguments that I don't agree with in terms of, you know, making more standards and rules. And
Well, a lot of that needs to be addressed on the state issue, because on so many areas, we're moving into conformance with state statutes to make
Yeah,
it easier on
I realize
ourselves
that.
and not have a different set of rules. So I think that's something that maybe needs to be addressed more at the state level than anything we can do.
Well, there's the other thing that people don't realize is, before we had this backlot driveway, there were a lot of homes built on backlots that didn't have road frontage, and some of those houses are now being sold. And back in the building boom, 2004, 2003, and 5, there was no real scrutiny of the mortgage companies, appraisers, and banks. Just everybody got a loan and a mortgage. Now they are looking at every single thing, and if they can find one thing wrong, you don't get your mortgage. So the problem is, if you don't have a backlot driveway ordinance that addresses the road frontage requirement, the lot width, you don't have the actual road built, you can't get a mortgage. And we've had several properties in the town of Raymond sold in the last year that we have bent over backwards to try to help them sell, knowing that we gave permits on lots that didn't have backlot driveway approval. And that's why, you know, these ordinances do protect homeowners like the Loys from when their daughter goes to sell this house that they're building, she'll be able to get financing.
Because the backlot driveway can actually be incorporated into the legal description of the property being sold.
Exactly, and that's why we have a lot of this. You have to have a deed, you have to have a survey, you have to have a road frontage, because if you don't have a lot. So yes, it's work, but you wouldn't have a lot unless you went through this. So, you know, there's pros and cons to it, and I'm not disagreeing with Greg. wanna be able to do what I want.
Well, remember, the
on my
banking
land.
industry is very much regulated and it's the government that's done this to us. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they
Well,
set the
I'm
rules and
just telling you
standards
from
and,
my I see both sides, and I.
like
I agree
Ronald
with what
Reagan
you say, but I
said.
also
Well,
agree
and I'm sitting there going, all I can do is make a decision based on what's in these
Exactly.
books.
Oh, I totally
Yeah.
agree.
I know,
That's
it's-
why I say if we play with this ordinance, I'm on the side of watering it down within the confines of any state laws we have to.
Well, I think we're in the right direction of trying to coalesce and make
And I
things
think
more
the
concise
the
and
checklist that you're talking
in
about.
agreement.
And I don't disagree with
in all
doing that
these
either.
major
so.
areas would be very helpful to people, and the cross-reference
Exactly.
between ordinances would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, moving on, one other thing I want to just briefly bring up is that our bylaws indicate we're supposed to have elections for officers every June, once a year, and that we need to have at least 5 members present in order to have an election. Well, we didn't have a meeting in June. Chairman O'Neill is absent, so we currently only have 4 members, so that we can't do anything about that tonight. If Kyle is seated by, is approved by the select people and is seated for the next meeting, even if Bob is not here, if everyone else is here, we would have 5 people here and we would be able to have election of officers. So since we don't know exactly what is going to be, how much of that we're going to be able to meet for the next meeting, Mary, I would like to make sure that election of officers is at least listed on the agenda. Even if we end up not being able to do it at the next meeting, it should be listed on the agenda so we can address it if we
Well,
can.
won't be able to get on the selectmen's meeting for the next meeting, which is the 16th, but he might make the next one, so we might be able to get him in the second week of September.
That's about when Bob.
That's about when
October,
Bob
yeah.
comes back.
Bob will be back by then anyway, and I would prefer to have Bob here because I want to nominate him to continue. And he probably
perfect
wants to
time.
be here,
Now's the
just,
perfect time.
just, you know, so we don't throw him to the wolves.
Snooze, you lose.
Chairman, may I bring up one other thing?
Yes.
Probably April or May, in between all of the ordinance changes, we had, the cemetery ordinance came forward. And we were told at that time that they would be back at the next meeting with their revisions, and we still haven't seen any of that.
I think what happened is, I think the complexion of that cemetery committee changed quite dramatically,
Okay,
and I don't think you'll see anything until next year.
okay.
And
Just
you
don't
know,
wanna lose it.
I'm glad
No, I
Sheila
think
brought
people
that
are-
up because
yeah.
this is the personal thing. But we bought a plot at the cemetery with the old little meeting house on Raymond Hill Road, and we are in the very back in the right-hand corner where they just cleared all the trees out there. We bought our lot almost 4 years ago, and they just cleared the trees about 6 months ago, and we can't put a gravestone or anything in because our portion slopes away a little bit and it needs loam put in. And I know the town is they're in the business of selling those lots and maintaining them. And I guess maybe I need some guidance as to who I should approach on getting it loam so we can install a headstone.
You'd start with Sue Look, and then it would be, I think, Public Works that does that work, so start with Sue Look, town clerk.
Okay. Well,
Well, you're still here, so it's good.
that's right, yeah. But life is very uncertain that way. We never know. Any
We'll make sure
other
there's
items?
enough cover road.
Just, everything passed at town meeting, right?
Yes.
All the
Yes, it
ordinance
did.
passed, even though I missed the vote when the hubbub about we're gonna leave it alone in the appeals board process, but in the end, that all passed, right?
Yes,
Yes.
it
Okay,
did. There wasn't a big hubbub.
well, not a big, compared to everything else, it was a big, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.